The look on Marcus's face was priceless when the hidden camera footage started playing in the boardroom. 5 pairs of eyes widened in horror as their perfectly crafted lies began to unravel on the giant screen behind them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You're probably wondering how 5 of Silicon Valley's most respected tech bros ended up caught in their own web of deception. My name is Maya Patel, and 3 months ago, I made the decision to stop being a victim and start being a vigilante. Some would call it paranoid to plant cameras around your workplace. I called it insurance. That morning at Tech Innovations started like any other. I arrived early, my laptop bag heavy with the proof of concept for my new AI security protocol. 3 years of work, countless sleepless nights, and enough coffee to fill an Olympic swimming pool had led to this moment. The office was quiet except for the gentle hum of servers and the faint aroma of expensive coffee brewing in the break room. Marcus was already there, of course. He always made sure to be the first of his little circle to arrive. I watched him through the glass walls of his office, his perfectly pressed shirt and practiced smile masking the ambition that had derailed so many careers before mine. As team lead, he had a talent for taking credit for other people's work, especially women's. I'd seen it happen to Rachel in UI design, to Priya in data analytics, and now he had his sights set on my project. Morning, Maya. His voice carried that familiar false warmth. Ready for the big presentation next week? The question seemed innocent enough, but I caught the slight smirk he shared with Derek, who had just walked in. Derek, with his country club membership and weekly golf games with the CEO, was perhaps the most dangerous of them all. He didn't need talent, he had connections. I forced a smile and clutched my coffee mug tighter. Just finalizing some details, I replied, deliberately vague. I'd learned that lesson 6 months ago when Ryan, our resident office politician, had taken my casual mention of a breakthrough in neural network optimization and somehow presented it as his own idea in the next department meeting. The memory of that day still stung. I had sat there, stunned into silence, as Ryan smoothly walked through my concept while James, the quiet enabler of the group, nodded along supportively. James never stole ideas himself, but he was always there, backing up the others, providing the veneer of credibility they needed. "Hey, team!" Victor's booming voice interrupted my thoughts. The newest addition to their circle bounded in, radiating the kind of aggressive confidence that came with being a man who had never been questioned in his life. He was young, ambitious, and had already managed to get his name on 2 patents that suspiciously resembled proposals from female colleagues who had since left the company. I retreated to my desk, positioning my monitor so I could watch their reflection in the glass partition. They were gathering in Marcus's office again, heads bent together in conspiratorial discussion. I opened my laptop, pretending to work while discreetly adjusting the tiny camera hidden in my badge holder. My hand trembled slightly as I checked the feed on my phone. The image was crystal clear, perfect for capturing evidence. My mentor, Dr. Linda Hayes, had warned me about this before she left last year. "Document everything," she had said, her voice tight with regret. I wish I had. She'd been the brightest mind in quantum computing before the same group of men had systematically dismantled her career. Now she worked for a competitor, and I was beginning to understand why. As I sat there, watching the 5 of them through my screen, I thought about all the women who had come before me. The ones who had their ideas stolen, their contributions minimized, their careers stunted. The ones who had left quietly, their potential lost to an industry that protected men like these. I thought about my younger sister studying computer science and dreaming of changing the world. I thought about the future she would face if nothing changed. My fingers brushed against the small USB drive in my pocket containing 3 months' worth of surveillance footage. In 1 week, I would present my AI security protocol to the board, and this time I had insurance. Let them try to steal my work. Let them walk into that boardroom confident in their superiority. They had no idea what was coming. The camera feed showed them laughing now, probably sharing another inside joke about golf handicaps or fantasy football. I allowed myself a small smile. Soon they would learn that they weren't the only ones who knew how to play the game. They had their old boys club. I had something better, evidence. Later that afternoon, I caught the first real hint that my suspicions were right. Through my hidden camera feed, I watched Marcus usher the others into the small conference room, the one with the broken glass panel that nobody had bothered to fix. They always met there, probably thinking the frosted crack made their conversations more private. They were wrong. This AI protocol is going to revolutionize everything. Marcus's voice came through clearly on my feed. The board's looking for something big for the IPO next quarter. This could be our ticket to the top. The way he said our made my stomach turn. 3 years of my research and suddenly it was our project. Ryan leaned forward, his designer watch catching the fluorescent light. I've already been dropping hints to Thompson in marketing. As far as he knows, we've all been working on this together from the start. He smiled, that same smile he'd worn 6 months ago when he'd stolen my neural network optimization concept. What about Maya? James asked, his voice barely above a whisper. At least he had the decency to look uncomfortable. She has all the documentation. Derek's laugh cut through the air like a knife. Documentation? Please, I had dinner with Richard last weekend. Richard, our CEO, was apparently quite impressed with Derek's vision for the company's future. Besides, who's going to believe her over the 5 of us? The words hit me like a physical blow, but they weren't surprising. I thought back to my conversation with Dr. Hayes last year, right before she left. We'd been standing in this same building by the coffee machine that always broke down. They'll do it slowly, she'd warned, stirring her coffee with trembling hands. First, they'll start showing up at your desk more often, asking innocent questions. Then come the private meetings you're not invited to. Finally, they'll present your work as their own, and they'll do it so smoothly that sometimes you'll question your own memory. She'd been right about everything, but there was one thing she hadn't counted on. One thing they hadn't counted on. I wasn't going to just document everything. I was going to make them document it themselves. Victor's voice pulled me back to the present. We need to be careful, though. That new board member, Janet Williams, she's been asking questions about project attribution lately. There was an edge of worry in his voice that gave me pause. I made a mental note to look into Janet Williams. Look, Marcus said, standing up to his full height, every inch the commanding team lead he pretended to be. This is how things work in tech. Maya's smart, she'll land on her feet. But this project? This is too big for just one person to handle. The board needs to see a united front, a strong team. We're doing her a favor, really. I watched them nod along, 5 men convincing themselves they were the heroes of this story. The camera caught every gesture, every smirk, every moment of self-satisfied rationalization. What they didn't notice was the small red light blinking steadily in the corner of the room, recording everything. That evening, as I was preparing to leave, I overheard Victor and Ryan in the break room. After tomorrow's prep meeting, Victor was saying, it'll be too late for her to do anything about it. Once we present the implementation plan to Marcus's specs, it's basically done. I felt a chill run down my spine. They were moving faster than I'd anticipated. My hand instinctively went to my phone, checking that my cameras were still running. They were. In fact, they'd just caught something interesting. Derek was alone in Marcus's office, frantically copying files from a USB drive. I smiled despite myself. They thought they had tomorrow to seal their plan. They didn't realize that with every secret meeting, every hushed conversation, every stolen file, they were only adding to my evidence. Tomorrow would indeed be interesting, but not for the reasons they expected. As I packed up my laptop, Dr. Hayes's last words to me echoed in my mind. The trick isn't just catching them in the act, Maya. It's making sure they can't talk their way out of it. Looking at my phone screen, where 5 different camera feeds showed 5 men plotting their own downfall. I knew she would be proud. The real question now was, who was Janet Williams and why was Victor so worried about her? The morning of the board presentation, I arrived 2 hours early. The security guard barely glanced up as I badged in. He was used to my early arrivals by now. The office was dark, exactly as I'd planned. I needed time to set up my backup drives and check all the camera feeds one last time. But when I rounded the corner to the main conference room, my heart stopped. The lights were already on. Through the glass doors, I could see them, all 5 of them, dressed in crisp suits, standing around my project slides on the giant screen. My project slides, but with their names on them. Maya. Marcus's voice carried a note of fake surprise. We didn't expect you so early. He was wearing his best suit, the one he reserved for major victories. Behind him, Ryan was clicking through my presentation, my 3 years of work stripped of my name. The board meeting got moved up, Derek explained smoothly. Didn't you get the email? It must have gotten lost in the shuffle, but don't worry, we've got it covered. His smile didn't reach his eyes. In fact, none of their smiles did. I stood there, frozen, as board members began filing in. My USB drive felt heavy in my pocket, but it was too late. They had begun their performance. I watched in stunned silence as Marcus stood up, straightened his tie, and began speaking. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, we're excited to present a groundbreaking advancement in AI security protocols. His voice was confident, rehearsed. Each word felt like a physical blow. Our team has been working tirelessly on this project. Our team. I felt bile rising in my throat as I slid into a chair at the back of the room. James caught my eye for a split second before looking away, his discomfort visible only to someone who knew where to look. Victor was beaming, probably already mentally spending his bonus. Ryan handled the technical slides with practiced ease, my slides, my diagrams, my life's work. The neural network architecture, Derek was saying, which our team developed over the past 3 years. He gestured to a complex diagram I had drawn on my living room wall before transferring it to digital form. I remembered the exact moment I'd solved that particular puzzle. 3 a.m., coffee gone cold, my cat asleep on my keyboard. A movement caught my eye. Janet Williams, the board member Victor had been worried about, was studying me intently. There was something in her expression I couldn't quite read. She wrote something in her notebook, then slid it slightly to the side, just enough for me to catch a glimpse of 3 words. Let them finish. I felt my phone vibrate. A text from an unknown number. Trust me, Jay. The rest of the presentation passed in a blur of stolen achievements and calculated lies. When it was over, the board members were nodding appreciatively. The CEO was smiling. Marcus and his team were accepting congratulations with practiced humility. I stumbled to the bathroom, barely making it into a stall before the tears came. 3 years of work, gone, stolen. But as I sat there, my phone buzzed again. Board reconvenes at 2 p.m. Bring everything. Jay, I wiped my eyes and looked in the mirror. The woman staring back at me wasn't defeated. She was angry, and she had receipts, lots of them. In my pocket, the USB drive contained not just camera footage, but something else they hadn't counted on. Something that would make their smug smiles disappear. As I reapplied my mascara, I remembered something else Dr. Hayes had told me. The best revenge isn't just exposing the truth, it's making them expose themselves. I checked my watch. 4 hours until the afternoon session. 4 hours to prepare for the real presentation. In the mirror, I practiced my own smile. They thought the show was over, but it was just beginning. Somewhere in the building, Janet Williams was waiting, and I had a feeling she had her own story to tell. I found Janet waiting in the small cafe across from Tech Innovations. She sat in a corner booth, 2 cups of coffee already on the table. Everything about her screamed polished corporate success, perfectly tailored suit, immaculate makeup, not a hair out of place. But there was something else in her eyes, something familiar. 4 years ago, I was you, she said without preamble, sliding one coffee toward me. Except I didn't have cameras. I didn't have proof. I had a revolutionary quantum encryption algorithm and a team of men who saw an opportunity. She pulled out a tablet. But now I have a board seat and a very particular interest in project attribution. Show me what you have. My hands trembled slightly as I plugged in my USB drive. 3 months of surveillance, I said, pulling up the first video. But that's not the best part. I opened another folder, revealing lines of code. I built a watermark into every piece of the project, time-stamped, encrypted, and embedded so deeply they never noticed. Janet's eyes widened as I played the footage. Marcus in his office, coaching the others on their parts, Derek copying files late at night, Ryan rehearsing technical explanations he barely understood, James looking increasingly uncomfortable in each meeting, Victor bragging about how they'd handle any questions about development timeline. Look at the timestamps on the code commits, I said, pulling up the repository logs. Every major breakthrough, every debug session, every implementation, all tagged with my digital signature. They were so busy plotting the presentation that they never thought to check the code itself. Oh, this is better than I hoped, Janet murmured, scrolling through the evidence. But we need more. Tell me about the cameras. Where exactly are they? I pulled up a floor plan on my laptop. One in the main conference room, hidden in the smoke detector, 2 in Marcus's office, 1 in my badge holder when I'm there, 1 in the thermostat, 1 in the break room's clock, and the best one? I couldn't help but smile. Is in Marcus's precious world's best team lead trophy, the one he keeps positioned to face every visitor to his office. Janet actually laughed at that. The ego of mediocre men never fails to amaze me. She pulled out her phone, checking the time. We have 2 hours until the board reconvenes. I need you to prepare 3 things: a timeline of events, a technical demonstration that only the true creator could present, and, she paused, a hint of steel entering her voice, your resignation letter. I stared at her. My resignation? Trust me, she said, her expression softening slightly. You'll want to have it ready. You won't need to submit it, but it's going to be a useful prop. Now, about that technical demonstration, tell me about the neural network architecture they presented this morning. For the next hour, we meticulously prepared. Janet recorded every detail, occasionally making quiet phone calls that seemed to consist mostly of her saying, "Yes, it's exactly what we suspected." I noticed she kept glancing at her watch as if waiting for something. At 1:30, my phone buzzed with a message from the IT department. Server logs retrieved as requested by Miss Williams. Uploading now. I looked at Janet questioningly. I had our IT team do a deep dive into the project server logs, she explained. Every login, every file access, every code commit for the past 3 years, cross-referenced with building access logs and email timestamps. Her smile was borderline predatory. Your friends have been busy, little bees, haven't they? Accessing project files at 2 a.m., copying entire directories. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized the scope of what Janet had been assembling. This wasn't just about my project anymore. This was about a pattern. Maya, Janet said, closing her tablet, what they did to you and to others before you ends today. But I need you to be prepared for what's coming. This isn't going to be just about exposing them. This is going to be about changing the entire culture at Tech Innovations. I thought about Dr. Hayes, about all the other women who'd left, about my sister still in college dreaming of a career in tech. I'm ready, I said, and I meant it. Janet nodded, standing up. Good, because in exactly 25 minutes, Marcus and his team are going to get a message about an emergency board meeting review of this morning's presentation, and this time, she smiled, we're going to give them a show they'll never forget. As we walked back to the office, I felt the weight of the USB drive in my pocket. It wasn't just carrying evidence anymore, it was carrying justice. The emergency board meeting announcement hit like a bomb. I watched through my camera feeds as Marcus's face drained of color reading the email. Within minutes, his office was full of barely contained panic. "This is impossible," Ryan was saying, pacing. "The presentation was perfect. We covered everything." But something had shifted. The usual confidence was gone, replaced by a nervous energy that made them look smaller somehow. Even Derek's golf buddy status with the CEO couldn't calm their nerves. A knock on my desk pulled my attention away from the feed. Kelly from HR stood there, coffee in hand, wearing what appeared to be an intentionally neutral expression. "Maya, do you have a moment?" I followed her to a small meeting room, my mind racing. Kelly had been with Tech Innovations for 15 years. She'd seen everything, or so I thought. What I didn't expect was what happened next. "Close the door," she said, then pulled out a thick folder. "Janet Williams asked me to compile this. It's every informal complaint, every exit interview, every coincidental resignation of female engineers over the past 5 years." She paused, her professional mask cracking slightly. "Including Dr. Hayes." My heart jumped at the mention of my mentor. Kelly opened the folder, revealing page after page of documented patterns. Women who'd had their work stolen, their contributions minimized, their careers stalled. Some names I recognized, others I didn't, but the pattern was undeniable. "I couldn't do anything before," Kelly said softly. "Not without proof, not without someone willing to speak up. But now—" She pulled out another document, an official HR investigation report dated just an hour ago. "Janet had me start this investigation weeks ago. We were just waiting for them to show their hands." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A message from Priya in data analytics. "In the break room. Come quick. Bring your laptop." The break room was full when I arrived. Priya, Rachel from UI Design, and 3 other women I recognized from various departments sat around the table. Their laptops were open, documents and emails displayed on their screens. "We heard about the emergency board meeting," Priya said. "We've been gathering our own evidence." She turned her laptop toward me, showing a carefully documented timeline of stolen ideas, missed promotions, and gradual project takeovers. "Janet reached out to us last week. We've been waiting for the right moment." Rachel spoke up next. "Remember that UI framework they said I abandoned? The one Ryan somehow completed?" She pulled up a set of files. "I've got every original design file, every mock-up, every prototype, time-stamped, backed up, and ready." My phone buzzed again. "Dr. Hayes. In the lobby. Security's clearing me for access now." Seeing her walk through those doors, head held high, was like watching my past and future collide. She looked exactly as I remembered, but stronger somehow. No more trembling hands. "You did good, Maya," she said, hugging me. "But Janet tells me you did more than just protect yourself. You built a case that could protect everyone." She looked around the room at the gathered women. "You did what I should have done years ago." The next hour was a blur of activity. Kelly coordinating with legal, Priya and Rachel organizing evidence, Dr. Hayes reviewing technical documentation. Every few minutes, another woman would arrive with her own story, her own evidence, her own determination to see change. Through my camera feed, I could see Marcus and his team growing increasingly agitated. They'd tried calling Derek's CEO contact twice, but strangely, he wasn't picking up. James looked like he was about to be sick. Victor had loosened his tie so much it was practically undone. At 1:55, Janet appeared in the break room doorway. "It's time," she said simply. "Maya, you ready?" I looked around the room at all these women who'd found their voices, who'd refused to be silent anymore. At Dr. Hayes, who was finally getting her vindication. At Kelly, whose years of carefully documented patterns would finally serve justice. "More than ready," I replied, picking up my laptop. As we walked toward the boardroom, I caught a glimpse of Marcus through his office window. He was straightening his tie, trying to summon back his usual confidence. He had no idea that on the other side of that boardroom door, 15 women were waiting with 15 laptops full of evidence. No idea that his perfect little world of stolen achievements was about to come crashing down. Janet checked her watch. 2 minutes, she said. Let's give them a finale they'll never forget. The boardroom looked different now. Where this morning it had been a scene of my humiliation, it was now set up like a courtroom. 15 women sat along one wall, laptops open, faces determined. The board members filed in, followed by the CEO, Richard Collins, whose usual jovial expression was notably absent. Marcus and his team entered last, their morning confidence replaced by barely concealed anxiety. They faltered slightly at the sight of Dr. Hayes sitting next to Janet, but quickly recovered, taking their seats with forced casualness. "Gentlemen," Janet began, standing, "we've called this emergency session to address some discrepancies in this morning's presentation." She nodded to Richard, who pressed a button on his laptop. The screen behind them came to life, showing the feed from Marcus's office trophy camera. The timestamp read 3 weeks ago. Marcus's voice filled the room. "Once we present this as our work, there's nothing she can do about it. It's 5 against 1. I watched their faces as the reality of what was happening hit them. Derek reached for his phone, probably trying to call Richard again, not realizing that his golf buddy had been in on this the whole time. Victor's aggressive confidence crumbled. Ryan's political smile froze. James looked like he wanted to disappear. But it was Marcus's face I couldn't look away from. I'd seen that face dismiss women's contributions, take credit for others' work, and smile through countless lies. Now I watched as it cycled through shock, denial, and finally fear. "We have 3 months of similar footage," Janet continued calmly, "but that's just the beginning." She gestured to Kelly, who distributed thick folders to each board member. "We've documented a pattern of systematic intellectual property theft and gender discrimination spanning 5 years. Dr. Hayes stood next to Janet. "The quantum encryption algorithm that made this company millions? That was mine. I have proof." She pulled up her own documentation on the screen. "And I'm not alone." One by one, women began standing. Rachel with her UI framework evidence, Priya with her data analytics documentation, each story building on the last, each piece of evidence tightening the noose. "But perhaps most damning," Janet said, turning to me, "is what's hidden in the code itself." "Maya?" I plugged in my laptop, pulling up the project repository. "Every piece of code in the AI security protocol has a watermark," I explained, my voice stronger than I expected. "A digital signature embedded in the architecture itself. Watch what happens when I run this verification script." The screen filled with timestamps, access logs, and authorship data. Hundreds of entries, all pointing to one creator, me. "Impossible," Ryan sputtered. "We developed this as a team." "Did you?" Richard finally spoke, his voice cold. "Then you can explain this neural network architecture to the board?" He gestured to the complex diagram. "In detail?" The silence was deafening. "I can," I said, standing. For the next 10 minutes, I walked through every intricacy, every innovation, every elegant solution I'd developed over 3 years. The board members leaned forward, genuinely engaged. This was the presentation I should have given this morning. "And here's the best part," I concluded, pulling up one final piece of code. "The security protocol has a built-in feature that tracks and timestamps every access attempt, including—" I paused, clicking through to a specific date, the night someone tried to copy the entire project to an external drive. Derek's face went pale. The camera in Marcus's office had caught him, but this was better. This was proof embedded in the very project they'd tried to steal. Janet stood again. "Mr. Collins, members of the board, we're not just here to expose theft of a single project. We're here to address a culture that has systematically pushed out some of our best talent." She gestured to the women lined up against the wall. "This stops today." Richard nodded, pressing a button on his phone. Security appeared at the door. "Marcus, Derek, Ryan, Victor, please escort these gentlemen to HR. Their access cards have been deactivated." He paused, looking at James. Mr. Chen, you'll be meeting with Internal Affairs. Your cooperation in this investigation has been noted. As they were led out, I caught Marcus's eye. All his swagger, his manipulative charm, his careful facade, gone. In its place was something I'd never seen before: defeat. Maya, Richard said, turning to me, I believe you have a presentation to finish? I stood, facing the board with my head held high. Behind me, 15 women sat ready to support me. Dr. Hayes smiled proudly. Janet nodded encouragingly. And on the screen behind me, my code, my work, waited to be properly introduced to the world. Yes, I said, opening my original slides. Let me show you how this actually works. 6 months later, I stood in the same boardroom, but everything was different. The plaque on the wall read, Maya Patel, Chief Technology Officer. Below it hung a framed copy of my first patent, the AI security protocol that had started it all. But it wasn't just my victory anymore. The mentorship program is exceeding all expectations, Rachel reported, pulling up the quarterly numbers. As head of our new Women in Tech initiative, she'd transformed her experience with discrimination into a force for change. We've paired 30 junior engineers with senior mentors, and the retention rates are unprecedented. Priya, now leading our largest development team, nodded in agreement. The anonymous reporting system Kelly implemented has already prevented 2 potential intellectual property disputes. She glanced at me knowingly. Though nobody's been bold enough to try anything like the Trophy 5, as they're now known in the industry. The story had made waves far beyond tech innovations. 3 other major tech companies had launched investigations into their own project attribution practices. Dr. Hayes had been invited to speak at conferences about changing tech culture, and Janet, she'd been promoted to head of the board's new Ethics and Oversight Committee. What happened to them? New employees would sometimes ask, curious about the story that had become almost legendary in Silicon Valley. Marcus was reportedly working at a small startup, no longer in any leadership position. Derek's golf club connections couldn't save him from being blacklisted by major tech firms. Ryan's attempt to spin the story had backfired spectacularly when the video evidence leaked, though we never did figure out who leaked it. Victor had left tech entirely. And James? After cooperating with the investigation and showing genuine remorse, he'd been offered a chance at redemption. He now worked in our ethics compliance department, using his experience to help identify and prevent similar situations. The changes weren't just procedural. Walking through the office now, I saw women leading stand-ups, presenting architectural designs, and mentoring new team members. The casual dismissal of women's contributions had been replaced by a culture of attribution and respect. Kelly had transformed HR from a passive repository of complaints into an active force for workplace equality. Every project now required clear documentation of contributions. The anonymous reporting system she'd implemented had become an industry standard. But my favorite change was visible through my office window, the junior engineers area, where my sister Amy had just started her first tech job. I watched her confidently presenting her ideas to a diverse team, knowing she'd never have to hide cameras or fight for recognition of her work. Hey, don't you have a call? Janet's voice interrupted my thoughts. She'd stopped by to discuss the upcoming board presentation, where we'd announce Tech Innovation's new Diversity in Tech Scholarship program. The industry panel on workplace ethics? I checked my watch. Yes, in 5 minutes. Dr. Hayes is moderating. Janet smiled. Try not to make them too nervous when you show the trophy camera footage. I laughed, gathering my notes. The footage had become a powerful teaching tool, shown in corporate training sessions and tech ethics classes, a reminder of how quickly justice could be served when women stood together. Opening my laptop for the video call, I caught sight of my reflection in the screen. The nervous engineer who'd hidden cameras in desperation was gone. In her place was a leader who'd helped change not just a company, but an industry. Dr. Hayes appeared on screen, along with faces from major tech companies across the country. Ready to help make some more changes? she asked. I thought about Amy and all the other women starting their tech careers, about the mentorship programs spreading across the industry, about the culture shift that had started with one hidden camera and grown into a movement. Always, I replied, and began to tell our story again. Because sometimes the best way to prevent history from repeating itself is to make sure everyone knows exactly how it happened. The trophy that had hidden the camera still sat on a shelf in my office, but now it had a new engraving: to Maya Patel, for showing us how to build not just better technology, but a better world. From the women of tech innovations. It was a reminder that justice doesn't always come from grand gestures. Sometimes it comes from small acts of courage, from hidden cameras and coded watermarks, from women standing together and saying, "Enough." And somewhere out there, I knew other women were watching, gathering their evidence, finding their voices. The Trophy Five had wanted to steal my project, but they'd given me something far more valuable instead. They'd helped me change the future.